a number that they both have in common. So, Alicia, what's this number in front of L? All right, so what is the common number that 1 and 2 have in common? So think about a common number that they both have in common. What number?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We will start the webinar in 3-4 minutes. Good morning and hello to everybody who has joined or joined. We're gonna kick off the webinar in like 2 minutes. Just gonna wait for everybody to come in. Okay. So welcome everyone to today's webinar session on test management and BDD. This will be an introductory session to provide you with a better understanding of what is behavior-driven development, or BDD in short. And we'll also explain what is test management before diving in how you can combine the two. So ultimately, you can experience then a smoother software development lifecycle, improved transparency, and other benefits So let's go straight into the session. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Sergey. I'm a product marketing manager at SmartBear. With me also we have Steven Kavan, Atlassian Ecosystems Manager, and Seb Rose, our Bdd advocate. Now, let's take a quick look at today's agenda. First, we're going to start with an overview of what is SmartBear, just in case anybody may not be familiar with us and the variety of things we do and offer. We'll then dive straight into the focus of the session, which is starting with what is BDD and test management, and we'll explore the benefits of combining those two practices. We'll then show you how you can use the BDD into test management using the Gherkin syntax. We'll do so with a live demonstration over two leading test management tools, namely Zephyr Jira and Zephyr Scale.
And one thing I want to add, Sergey, this session will be recorded and emailed for everyone who registers via Zoom. If you're joining us on YouTube, feel free to look in the description for the registration information if you'd like to participate in our Q&A and also get a recording of this session. So make sure to use the Q&A section. You know, we have people saying hi on chat, which is great, but make sure to use the Q&A section as you have your questions so we can moderate and answer them.
Yeah, we'll be watching those also coming in on YouTube. So feel free to drop those questions in there or via Zoom, yeah, like Steve said. So also worth pointing out, yeah, we'll be recording this session, so you'll receive a follow-up email with all useful materials and the recording. So quick introduction. So SmartBear was founded in 2009 in Boston, Massachusetts, and we have grown to over 650 employees. We have like 12 global offices encompassing North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. And well, our customers, we have over 15 million software professionals and 24,000 companies across like 194 countries that use SmartBear tools. And we have over 14 different solutions across software development lifecycle, including 3 very popular open source initiatives, the popular API testing tool called SoapUI and Cucumber, and also Open API initiative, also known as the Swagger API, which is for API design documentation. There is a broad range of commercial tools across our product portfolio that cover different areas of SDLC that we offer. So for example, in the design phase, we have a tool like Swagger Hub to design and document your APIs using the API specification. And we have Zephyr, which we can talk more about in this webinar. This is a family name for all our test management tools. So and we do for designing and managing your tests. And then when we go into review phase, there's a tool called Collaborator, which is our code and document review tool. The bulk of our tools are in the testing phase. We are a very QA and testing focused organization. We have testing tools for API testing automation space with Ready API. We have the UI test automation with Test Complete. And we also have cross-browser testing, which is our multiple device testing tool. So you can test across various browsers, phones, and devices, desktops as well. So we don't have any tools in the deploy phase, but we do integrate with a lot of the big players, such as IBM, AWS, and Kubernetes. And in the monitor phase, we have a synthetic monitoring tool called AlertSite. So you can see we have a wide variety of tools, and you can learn more about those on smartbear.com. Now, we just wanted to quickly talk about our values, SmartBear. So we're deeply ingrained into development. So these values are deeply ingrained into our development of our different tools. Essentially, we want to help organizations achieve agile and DevOps success. Because as you know, agile and DevOps is not something you just get to and then you're done. This is something you continuously work towards and improve upon. And we want to help you along this journey. So we the aim for our tools is to be easy to use, have reusable components, be highly collaborative, and be open source. And it's not just about the commercial tools we integrate, but also the open source tools that are very popular. So we want to have our tools work with things like Jenkins and Cucumber, and we want to support different open source communities as well. We have many different organizations that use one or more of our tools. So this is like a quick snapshot. So companies that work in financial services, technology, manufacturing, and all these companies are seeing various benefits of the values that I showed earlier. So let's get into the main topic of this session. Let's start exploring what is exactly behavior development, or BDD in short. Essentially, BDD is a way for software teams to work better together. It's about closing the gap between the people who understand the problem they're trying to solve and the people who know how to solve this problem. So BDD helps bring those people together and get better results when building software. But how does this exactly work? So we do this by focusing on collaborative work around real-world examples. And the key is we want to describe, using these real-world examples, how the system should behave. And essentially, day to day, BDD's activity is a three-step iterative process: discovery, formulation, and automation. And the idea is to make each change small and iterate rapidly, moving back up a level each time you need more information. So each time you automate and implement a new example, you've added something of value to your system and you're ready to respond to feedback. During this process, our teams align using a common business language known as Gherkin, which provides a simple given, when, then format to define expected user behavior and functionality to technical and non-technical teams. So bringing those two together. And later in this session, we'll dig deeper into Gherkin and how to use it in context of test management tools.
Yeah, and so one thing, Sergey, that you said that was really good is looking at Agile and DevOps. It also applies to BDD. You don't just achieve BDD; you work at it at some point, And these are the three core practices that you really have to focus on. And I hope that looking at three core practices, you can see how business people, technical people can have a part in each one. Obviously, as you get to automation, it'll be more technical. But as long as you align these three practices, have that common business language, which we'll talk about, you'll have more success together as a team, focusing on what you want to create for your user. So yeah, this is something you just kind of constantly work at. You communicate, collaborate, using these three core practices. So definitely something I wanted to call out there, Sergey. You made a good point there.
Thanks, Steve. Yep. And now, just to take a quick break, we'll run our first poll of the session. So we are curious where you are in your journey to adapt BDD in your processes. So are you currently using any BDD automation tools? And let's have a look how it goes. It's great. So we have
it seems like we're having an issue here.
Oh.
All right, there we go. The poll should be launched now.
Wrong poll.
Yeah, so we're just curious if you're using any BDD automation tools. Just BDD is one of the, methodologies, practices that have many different kinds of implementations. We talk about Cucumber a bit more because we support Cucumber's open source community and implement it within our test management tools. So definitely just interested to learn a bit more. Cool. So I'll end the poll here, and it seems like for the most part, and I'll share the results so you guys can have a look as well. Most people in today's session are using Cucumber Open. or in terms of if they're using a tool, but most people are actually not using any BDD tools. So, that's one thing you'll have a glimpse into today, but this is definitely a bigger topic that you can go into later on as well. So this will definitely be a beginning to this conversation around BDD.
Cool. All right, now let's move on. And so the next part, obviously, this webinar is an important piece, is what exactly test management? Let's take a look at it and what it defines. So test management is a practice. In a nutshell, it's a practice that allows you to manage various aspects of your testing activities. So these might include gathering requirements, defining test cases, planning, executing tests, managing automation, creating, tracking defects, and reporting. So you can see that test management is very broad, and there's a whole range of different practices fall into test management too. So to help you unlock the full value of testing and maximize collaboration in your teams, and developers and testers, you will eventually need a test management tool. So not only it ensures that testers and developers are on the same page, it also ensures that you can take a more strategic approach to testing and ensures that your application is ready for release. There are many test management tools out there, and today we'll be discussing two of those, two leading test management tools from SmartBear, Zephyr for Jira and Zephyr Scale. All right, we have another poll here. Steve?
Yep, the poll should be on your screen in a moment here.
So I think we had a quick glimpse beforehand. Yeah, so there's quite a few Zephyr Jira users and also Zephyr Scale.
Yeah. Test management is another space where, there's a lot involved. And when we talk about BDD and test management together, it's kind of like a intermingling of these two spaces, but there's many, many different tools that you can use for test management. And then within all those tools, organizations can be using them completely differently. So, this is just great information for us to have. And then as we show you SmartBear test management tools, it's going to be a look at how you can use it with that. So thank you everyone for participating. Again, most people use Zephyr for Jira. It's one of our most popular test management tools. But as we can see, we do have an interesting mix between HP, using Excel, a more manual way of doing test management. And some people aren't doing any. So quite a good mix here, something that we'll keep in mind as we continue on here.
Yep. So having discussed in broad terms what is BDD and test management, let's explore how these two can work together. So first, we need to ensure we get the main concepts right. We already discussed BDD and also mentioned, I briefly mentioned Gherkin. So what is Gherkin? It's essentially a structured language used to describe behavior of software. It provides a simple given when then format to define expected user behavior and functionality for technical and non-technical teams. And our Zephyr test management tools provide a comprehensive support for Gherkin-based frameworks, such as Cucumber, and we'll get into that shortly.
Yes. So this is that common business language that everyone can understand, which is going to be the massively important for test management.
Yep. And one important point to make here is that Gherkin and BDD are two different things, actually. So, for example, you may use Gherkin Syntax language to describe your test scenario, but this doesn't mean necessarily that you follow BDD. BDD has a much larger scope than test management because BDD basically is a company-wide cultural and process change that goes outside of the primary scope of test management tools. So, but even though test management and BDD are different, there is one area that overlaps, and that is automated tests created by BDD practice of automation, and it should be included within the scope of the product test management activities. Since we can think of BDD automation as being equivalent to automated acceptance tests, it is essential to merge these results with other data collected by test management. And now quickly just go over what are the benefits, why you should combine the two. So most organizations can benefit from combining test management and BD practices. So by combining the two, teams can experience a more effective collaboration between teams, smoother software development lifecycle, clearer workflows, and improved transparency and visibility for stakeholders. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So just to add to that, so we're taking a part of BDD and more specifically the Gherkin syntax and applying that to test management. And whether or not it's depending on your organization, your QA team may be the only ones kind of taking that part of BDD and applying it to their test management. And then product team, more sort of, business analysts may see that and start using it. So it could be a start for your organization. But either way, it's very helpful for everyone to understand what user behavior are we testing for, so that the testers make sure that they are focused on the user and what you're trying to deliver. The BAs and the product team can easily understand what the testers are doing at any point. So it just makes it a lot easier. So even if your organization doesn't have full BDD, the 3 core practices, if you start using Gherkin, it can still have these great results for your team.
Yep. Now, before we jump into the demo and actually show how those two work together through our tools, let's talk a little bit about these tools. So here at SmartBear, we endeavor to offer the right tool, test management tool for the organization, because there's no one size fits all. So because all teams work differently, they might have different needs. So it's important to find a test management solution that best fits those needs and the size of the organization and where you're on your journey with the test management. And so this is why we have a Zephyr portfolio. We have 2 Jira-based offerings that will help you achieve your test management needs, Zephyr Jira and Zephyr Scale. I'll spend a bit of time going over both before we delve into how we can introduce the BD Gherkin. So first off, we have Zephyr Jira, and this is our flexible, easy to use test management solution inside Jira. And it's perfect for smaller, agile focused teams working within a single project on a single Jira instance. It's a great it's a great tool for teams wanting to get started really quickly with test management basics, such as test design, execution, and automation. But what if you want to use a mix of waterfall and agile, and you work on multiple Jira projects, and your scale is kind of expanding rapidly if you're testing? So we have also Zephyr Scale, which basically answers that question. It comes with advanced reusability features, such as cross-project hierarchical test libraries, versioning, parameters, and as well as offering advanced test planning and reporting features. And similar to Zephyr Jira, you have the option to scale your testing with BDD, CI, CD, and automation integration. All this makes Zephyr Scale ideally suited for teams and organizations working with larger test libraries across multiple projects on a single Jira instance. Also, if you're coming from a legacy test management tools such as Micro Focus ALM, TestRail, and you're looking for these enterprise-grade features inside your test management solution inside Jira, then Zephyr Scale is also a really great choice for you. And here's a quick overview of the features side by side between the 2 products. We intend both products to coexist naturally next to each other, with Zephyr Jira as a perfect starting point if you want to jump into testing in Jira, and Zephyr Scale as the next step up in that journey for anybody looking to advance their testing efforts. We also have a third test management solution called Zephyr Enterprise. It offers a full range of enterprise-grade features. Its a key defining feature is a standalone solution. So unlike Zephyr Jira and Zephyr Scale, which are Jira apps. And Zephyr Enterprise defining feature is that it's a standalone solution but it also provides real-time integration with Jira and supports working across multiple Jira instances versus a single instance in Zephyr Jira and Zephyr Scale's case. We'll have a detailed comparison between all these three test management products we'll share after this session. Sorry,
One
Steve.
thing I want to add, someone has a question in Zoom. If there's any REST API plugins where Zephyr for Jira, Zephyr Scale can integrate BDD that tests that are written in BDD or Gherkin Syntax rather, similar to what they have for ALM. So, we'll be going through the product demo where we'll have a look more in the product. So we're not going to have a demo of the REST API per se, but both tools do have REST APIs and integrations with test automation that include tests written using Gherkin Syntax or Cucumber more specifically. So there is support for, if you have that full CI/CD test automation already happening and you're looking to switch test management tools, you can still have that tight integration between all of them.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Steve. And we're ready to jump into the demo section.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, just a couple more questions here. We can just answer before we jump into the demo. Yeah, so there will be a recorded session. So if you do have to drop off, you will get a recorded session or recording of this session. So feel free to watch that later on. Both Zephyr for Jira and Zephyr Scale are integrated with Jenkins. Also won't be showing that today, but it is something that is supported. Zephyr Scale has a Jenkins plugin. Zephyr for Jira, we have some scripts and the REST API that you can use. So both of them are integrated with that. Great. So let's go ahead.
Stop sharing my screen, yeah, and you can take over, Steve.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into looking at the product. As we do this, we're going to be looking at two different products, Zephyr for Jira and Zephyr Scale. We're not going to get a full view of everything that you can do within each product. It'll be an introduction that you can then use to then look at one tool more than another based on what your needs may be. And we'll have a look at how each tool integrates with Gherkin Syntax, as we said before, which is a great start to then having those BDD practices within your organization if you already don't, or if you do, you can start applying it to your QA team and test management. So let's start off this demonstration with Zephyr for Jira. Zephyr for Jira is one of our add-ons to Jira available in the Atlassian marketplace on Jira Cloud, Server, and Data Center, where I'm currently going to be demonstrating on Jira Cloud for both tools. And Zephyr for Jira is really meant for the smaller agile teams that want to get started quickly, more focused on single projects within Jira. So really, it's just a project to project basis that we're going to be focusing on. Zephyr for Jira works by using the test issue type, which is why it integrates on a single project to project basis. The test issue type lets you use the same interface that you have for any Jira issue. So that includes, adding descriptions, linking issues, and then it'll add actions onto that are specific to testing with Zephyr for Jira. So when you create tests, you don't have to necessarily learn anything new if your organization's already using Jira. And you'll just have the ability to come in and actually start defining your tests directly within your issues. So that's what this example is here. I have a test, in my website, I'm testing SSO login. I have my test details and, very similar to any other test management solution, we'll have those different test steps that we'll define. I can then link to the Jira story, and once I go and execute, we can also link to bugs that may occur during test execution. So the way you manage tests in Zephyr for Jira is by using test cycles And each test cycle, which lives in each individual project, will have any number of tests defined within it. So here we can see I have a performance test cycle, I have some ad hoc testing that can occur, and I have my sprints that may be defined within a specific Jira release. Within each test cycle, I can have any number of tests. As we can see, these are their Jira IDs. I can then go in and see exactly what's happening for each one. So if we go in and pop into this test execution for that login that we were testing, you can see that it failed. There's a defect attached to it. So you can either create a new defect or link to an existing one. And then for each test step, you can also define the status as well. So you're able to manage all of your testing within your Jira project, within your test cycles, and have an easy way to view all of the testing activity that occurs within your Jira project. When you look at reporting, which is kind of the next step within test management, Zephyr for Jira does offer some reporting based on a very high level test summary. So you can just have a look at everything that's happening within your tests, have some metrics kind of baked in. So if we go to test metrics automatically, or you can go in and within your Jira dashboards, you can use any of the 8 Zephyr for Jira gadgets that we have. So it is a smaller number of reports than Zephyr Scale, but it does have a good amount of flexibility in terms of looking at your testing activity per project. And as you continue testing, you have more and more tests coming in, and you go in and have them linked to defects and Jira stories. You can then also have a traceability matrix that will allow you to see how your tests and your other work in Jira are linked. So the final sort of key part of the reporting, and this is also true for Zephyr Scale, is that traceability. I want to understand, what's been happening throughout all of my testing. I'm not going to look at every single test individually, but I can see very clearly, for example, this story, how many tests cover it. In some cases, you may have no tests covering it, which then this matrix is great because you can then say, well, there should be some testing done on this story because it's a very high priority. What executions occurred for this test? And that also includes a good view on each test cycle. So we can see it's mostly within sprint 1 that this testing has occurred. And then if anything fails or any defects are created for any reason, you'll also see that very clearly. So you get this end-to-end look throughout your testing to understand what coverage do you have or need based on your priorities and exactly what's going on within your testing. So that's a little bit about Zephyr for Jira as a test management tool, how you can create the test, manage the test executions, and report on it. This does happen within a single project, which is one of the main differences between Zephyr for Jira and Zephyr Scale. And as you look to start using a BDD practices with test management, you can implement Gherkin syntax very easily into any test. So for this example, we're going to create a new test. And in this new test, we're going to start using BDD or using the Gherkin syntax within the BDD methodology. So I'm going to create a test here. Let's say something simple. User searches for a table on my e-commerce website. I can define this within the Jira issue type, what components are being tested here. I can add a couple. This is pretty important when you think of when you think of how you're going to report on all of your testing activity. And the key part regarding Zephyr for Jira and using BDD is labeling it as a BDD scenario. So when Zephyr for Jira sees this BDD scenario syntax, it's going to turn that test step functionality into a Gherkin syntax editor so that you can go in and write your Gherkin syntax and define your test in that way. So let's go ahead and I'll create this test. We'll open up our test details. And what we're going to be able to do is now define the test using Gherkin syntax. Now, the great thing about Gherkin syntax when you define the test is that you're really focusing on the user. Using the given, when, then syntax really focuses on a scenario where your user performs some action, and that action, based on some condition, leads to some result. So in this example, user searches for table, pretty self-explanatory, but with the given, when, then syntax, I can define, what the user is doing. So in this case, I'll define where the user is, the action they do to initiate the result that we're testing for. So they search for table. And as a result, the items related to table are displayed. So whether or not you understand what my website is doing doesn't really matter. Whether you're new, you're technical, non-technical, you could understand exactly what this test is meant to achieve. And then as you execute this either ad hoc or within specific test cycles, you can go ahead and have an understanding of what's going on here. So once you get to executing these BDD tests, or these tests using Gherkin syntax rather, you can either manually, if they're manual tests, go in and update the test execution results, or using Zephyr for Jira, you can export feature files using the test. So maybe, you may have some tests already defined using Gherkin and BDD that you want to upload into Zephyr for Jira. But if you're creating new tests, you can also download the feature files and use that as a starting point, whether it's you, your automation team, your DevOps team, however your organization may be set up. You can hand off these feature files with this Gherkin language that makes it a lot easier to understand. They can implement the automation in however your CI/CD system works, and then either using the REST API or automation integration, or just manually uploading Cucumber results, you can have these results automatically uploaded from your test automation. So that's how Zephyr for Jira works with the Gherkin syntax, which is when you think about test automation and using Gherkin syntax, really it's in that automation phase of the BDD core practices. Well, we have a couple of questions here that we can have a look at before we start looking at Zephyr Scale. As I said, these are introductions to each product. So, we're not going to be able to break down necessarily everything you can do within each. So someone asked, I have a test which asks about Gherkin. Yeah, so that's one thing, you can follow up if you have a question necessarily about Gherkin, but when you have a test and you want to use the Gherkin syntax, really it's this simple, using that label within Zephyr for Jira. And if you're not familiar with the Gherkin syntax, our cucumber.io website has a great reference breakdown in terms of everything that you can achieve within the Gherkin syntax. I'm using a bit more of a simple given, when, then example, but there's a lot more that you can do to define as explicit as you need the test details. So are components pre-built into the project, or do we define them manually? So it would depend. I think Jira may pre-build some components, but for the most part, organizations define those components. Either as you're creating the test, you can define new components on the fly, or you can take a sit down, cross-functional meeting and just define a bunch of components that break down your software into whatever is relevant. So it is done manually, but once you do that, once you create a new component, you don't have to define them multiple times. Everything just you can search and group them up as much as you would like there. So let's continue and have a look at Zephyr Scale. There will be a Q&A section, so we will circle back and have a look at any questions that I may not have a chance to answer to at this moment. So that's Zephyr for Jira, single project test management meant for those agile teams that need to ramp up their testing as quickly as possible. It still has all of this functionality around test cycles and everything you would need within test management for that reporting. But as organizations grow, or for organizations that are larger, the Zephyr Scale add-on is better suited in a lot of cases. One of the reasons is because it works on a multiple project basis. So separate from Zephyr for Jira, Zephyr Scale does not work with a test issue type per se. It works more adjacent to your Jira instance. It's still in your Jira instance. You install it from the Atlassian Marketplace. It's available on Jira Cloud, Server, and Data Center. But when you install it, you really get a testing center that allows you to have multiple tests that call into multiple different projects. So someone had the question, what if you have test cases that need to be used within multiple projects? That's where you may want to look at Zephyr Scale, understanding that, okay, we're not going to use an issue type, but what we will have is the ability to interchangeably use these tests for multiple different projects and have that capability for my organization. So let's look a little bit more at Zephyr Scale as a test management tool, and then we'll look at how it supports Gherkin and Bdd. So Zephyr Scale has a couple of different parts that we're going to break down that are conveniently placed here. We have our test cases, which we'll start with, our test plans, test cycles, where you manage those executions, and reports. And each part of this, what we're going to see is a bit more of a mature functionality where you can have a lot more flexibility with, folders, subfolders, test plans, test cycles that go across multiple projects. And it really goes a lot farther than Zephyr for Jira. So here we can see our test cycles. I have multiple different folders. In some cases, I have subfolders that we can have a look at. And if we go ahead and have a look at a specific test, let's go under content management and have a look at this login test. We'll be able to see an example of how Zephyr Scale defines tests. So it's not an issue type, but it is still very streamlined when you're looking to define your tests. You can see here we have our name, we have the objective of this test. You can add preconditions. So in a lot of cases, there may be something that you have to define before your test can be executed. You can define that very clearly. And then these test details provide great granularity in terms of how important it is, what is the status, any components you may have. You can estimate the time that it may take. And then you can also have labels and mark it as an automated or manual test. When you look at each of these different parts, you can also define multiple versions of each test. So this one is just the 1.0 version. There's not any other versions for this test specifically. But as I define my testing and the test matures and there's different functionality, I can mark this as deprecated, create a new version, and use that for future test executions. So the workflow sort of is defined in that way. And then when you look at the test script, you can have your parameters. So in this case, I'm logging in with a specific username and password. And within the actual test, you can have multiple different steps. And those steps do include a feature to call to other tests as well. So in this case, before I log in, I have to launch my application. I have a separate test that covers that I just call to. So for anything that needs an application launch, I just call to the specific test as opposed to redefining it every single time. So we can see the different test steps. We can see when it was executed. And I'll go a little bit into executions when we go into the test cycles. We have our traceability. So the reason it's still in Jira, this is not a standalone test management solution, is you still want to integrate with that work in Jira. You have your stories, you can have your defects, and integrate with all of them. The difference here is because it's more adjacent, you can have stories and defects that are linked across multiple projects. So I define my login, but maybe my application has many different subsections of how people use it. Those are defined within different Jira projects, different teams of developers are focusing on it, but my tests are more centralized, can link to all of them, and be used for all of them. You can add attachments and then have a very clear audit history of what's been going on with your tests. So this test hasn't been used that often, so you can see Lorna created it. I updated it as I was setting up for this webinar. So that's the test within Zephyr Scale. And then you have other functionality around test management. Your organization, your QA team can create test plans which define criteria for a batch of testing that you're going to run, and that could be linked to test cycles and those executions. So in this example, we have our master plan for functional testing. We can define a test strategy, we can define any assumptions, what environments we're using, risk of failures that may occur, any dependencies. And this is really just that document that you can use to understand, this is how we're going to tackle testing for some certain, sprints or whatever method you may be using. And then when you want to link that to tests, like the actual test you created, you can link it to specific test cycles. And in these test cycles are where the actual test executions will live. So them being separated is actually really good because you also have this further flexibility to connect things how you would like. So that third piece of test management, like actually managing your tests, are these test cycles. And in each test cycle, you can have any number of test cases that can be executed within it, sometimes multiple times. So if we go, actually, let's look at the execution, not the test itself. But if we go to the login test, we'll be able to see what exactly has happened with this test. So let's go ahead through this test cycle. We have our test cases. We have this traceability, so we can see it's related to that functional test plan. And then we have the executions that occurred as well. So I'll open up this execution here. Actually, let me open up a new one so that you can see how it's defined. So in this execution, Actually, this is not something I expected, but is pretty interesting. At some point, I did change the test script. Zephyr Scale automatically notifies you if something is out of date. So I am trying to execute this, but the test script does need to be updated. It'll automatically do that for you. And then you can go in and define for each step what happens, whether it passes, doesn't pass, blocked, or some other issue, some other status that you can implement here. So that's how you can then execute it. And that was more of a manual execution, right? I'm just going in and adding each one. And when you look at reporting, which is very important for test management, Zephyr Scale does offer more robust reporting mechanisms than compared to Zephyr for Jira and other competitors within the Atlassian marketplace. So because we have all of this flexibility, multiple projects, we also have the reporting behind it to look at all of this different testing things that you may be doing. So here I can create different filters, but I'm just going to create a very generic test execution results. And as you can see, instantaneously, we have a ton of different information around our testing. We have a large list of reports that are growing with every, as we develop more. And in them, you'll be able to look at all of this different information. So in this example, I have test execution results, but by coverage. So it looks at every story that's being linked. And if you look a little bit closely, it's a little small here. There are different issues from different projects, and we can see what the coverage looks like for all of those different issues. You can look at it by environment. At this point, most of them either use Firefox or it doesn't have an environment listed. And all of this different information, you can go in and look at in different ways. And then you also have your traceability matrix and reporting as well. So again, you have your Jira issue types, your stories, your defects, and at some point your testing. So you want to look at that all in one easy way to understand what exactly your story is, and we can see here very clearly what the test is for it, the status, and whatever defects were created. So that's Zephyr Scale from a test management perspective, and how, compared to Zephyr for Jira, which is more single project, single Jira project, Zephyr Scale supports multiple Jira projects, has a lot more fleshed out functionality meant for the larger growing teams that need to sort of grow their QA along with that. So when we talk about BDD, and now I want to start using Gherkin, I want to start defining and using this shared business language, it's also very easy to do. So I can create a new test case here. Let's say, we'll use the same example that we use for Zephyr for Jira, just to keep it consistent. We can define our objective, any precondition, and go in and define our test script. But instead of using step-by-step or just a plain text, we easily have this BDD Gherkin type that we can enable and use the Gherkin syntax for. So here, I'll just go in and I'll copy and paste it in. I don't think people want to see me typing the same Gherkin scenario again. But we can see here very similar. We have our scenario here. It's defined in that Gherkin syntax. So anyone can come in without having to know, every part of my application, understand what scenario we're looking for. Then we can go in and actually define executions, link it to any issues that may be within it, attach anything that may be relevant, screenshots, whatever you may have in there. So for both products, Zephyr Scale and Zephyr for Jira, you really think about for your organization, what's the most suitable. We have that table. We do have a more detailed comparison sheet that we'll send out that you can look at. But for both, if you're interested in integrating a core BDD practice around test automation by using the Gherkin syntax first, you can do that without any extra lift. As you see, it's just quick, 1 minute to enable you have. For Zephyr Scale, you can also define your tests and export feature files similar to just any feature file, and hand that over to your automation team, your DevOps team. They can implement it within their CI/CD workflow. And for Zephyr Scale, right back to Jira using in Jenkins, there's a Jenkins plugin. So it can be a post build step, it can be in the API, and automatically update the status of test executions. So that's how easily you can start using behavior-driven development, the Gherkin syntax more specifically, start implementing that within your test management, wherever your organization may be with BDD. You can start today by just using Gherkin syntax. And as you want to learn more about BDD, we do have a lot of great resources on cucumber.io and on smartbear.com that can help other teams within your organization understand what BDD is and start becoming more mature within those 3 core practices. But at that point, you can have tests that are already defined with Gherkin, make it a lot easier for everyone to understand. So that's Zephyr Scale and Zephyr Jira. I think, we want to enter into our Q&A section. Sergey, so I'll put the screen share back to you.
Thank you.
We have quite a few questions, which is really great. As we go into the Q&A section, and Sergey will reshare his screen here, we'll also launch a last-minute poll that'll just basically ask if you're interested in learning more about any of these aspects, because within an hour, you don't really have enough time to go through and explain every single part of these different features. And then when it comes to BDD, that is a whole nother space of knowledge that you can really dig into. So feel free to go in and reply if you'd like to work with us, and we can send more information out. And let's go ahead and start looking at the Q&A box.
Yep.
So someone asked, how do you manage test cases that are used in multiple projects? So for that, as I said, definitely Zephyr Scale. That would be very helpful to just have that immediately in terms of functionality. Does Zephyr Scale have exploratory testing capabilities, record screen and create a bug with recording attached? So Zephyr Scale doesn't have the exploratory testing capabilities natively. There are the capabilities to attach recordings and images to test executions and tests there. So you can have any exploratory testing integrated with Zephyr Scale. Is it possible to link test cases with stories from multiple Jira instances? So Zephyr Scale and Zephyr for Jira work solely within a single Jira instance. If you have multiple Jira instances, you can migrate test cases between them for sure. But if you're looking to synchronize multiple Jira instances, like in real time, you may want to explore Zephyr Enterprise as that standalone option. It is a standalone tool. It doesn't install into your Jira instance, but the Jira integration does have the ability to link to multiple Jira instances. That's not something we showed here today, but with Zephyr Jira and Zephyr Scale, it's not the best solution for multiple Jira instances. Any questions, Sergey, that you caught your eye here that you want to?
Yes. So I'm just looking at the questions that come in the general chat. So does Zephyr Scale has any storage limitations? I believe don't really. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it is based within Jira, but it doesn't have any like storage limitations outside of what Jira would allow. So you may have to look a little bit further if you're thinking about something, I guess, on the very high end of what you're going to store. But that shouldn't be a limitation from Zephyr Scale.
Right. And a question from, I just jumped, from Benjamin. So in Zephyr Scale, you demonstrate the link from Jira ticket to test case. If a Jira ticket content changes, is there any integration for status update for Zephyr Scale?
So, well, let me see if I can. Yeah, that is an interesting question. Since they're connected within the traceability matrix, you'll be able to see that linked together. I think if you want something more automatic though, that like Zephyr Scale changes based on that, I'm not too sure about that. In terms of like if you want something more automatic, I know Jira has some automation capabilities that may help out with that. But I'm not actually too sure. You might have to explore a little bit in the documentation for that one.
Thanks, Steve. Let's see. We'll just jump in maybe in the questions in the dedicated chat window. Can Zephyr Jira be integrated with Karate framework? No, I've not heard that one before.
So I don't know the karate framework either, but so it's not something we explicitly say we integrate with, but both Zephyr Jira and Zephyr Scale do have a variety of integrations that are more based on like the report type. So JUnit is one of the big ones. Zephyr Jira does have test and G integrations. So if the karate framework integrates with that reporting format, then there is a way to integrate the two that you can look at. And I would be surprised if it doesn't, just because JUnit's a pretty popular kind of open source report type.
Yep. There's one from Naveen. Is BDD available by default in Zephyr Jira? So again, we need to make clear that it's not BDD, it's the Gherkin Syntax editor that works with compatible BDD language. So, and the answer is yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. If that's, like within the documentation, you can, this is broken down a bit more, but you just have to make sure that the label is applied, that BDD underscore scenario label is applied. And then the test steps will convert from steps to that Gherkin syntax.
Yep.
There's
a question about we integrate with VSTS, the Visual Studio. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that tool. Are you, Steve?
I'm familiar at a high level, and similar to the question about the karate framework. If that's not something we natively list, if it does, have the supported output or is able to consume or use APIs, then we will be able to integrate with it. That's really the great part of having the integration set up that way, is that not everything has to be natively listed in our support. One question that's pretty interesting, someone asked, Daniel asked, when uploaded via some CI/CD automation, how are automated Cucumber test results associated with tests defined in Jira? Is it manual? Does it match on the given when then strings? Or is it the scenario name or something else? So it's different for each product, I believe, but so for Zephyr Scale's example, it is based on the name of the scenario, and there's a specific annotation that you can follow. So when you download the feature file, there's an annotation that you can use that will automatically link results to that specific test in Zephyr Scale. So it is based on that. So it's something you can easily track alongside of it. It's not something you manually have to do every single time.
And I think we're at the end of our time.
Yeah, so we are at the end of our time. We have a lot of questions, which is great. We're not going to be able to get to them all. There will be a recording of this sent out. And for anyone who answered the poll, we will be sending out more information. if you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend going on cucumber.io or on the SmartBear website on our specific product page, and you can see more about our tool, read the documentation, and then also just try it out if you saw something that you kind of think is more in line with what your organization needs. Within the Atlassian marketplace, they make it very easy to start a 30-day trial of either Zephyr for Jira or Zephyr Scale on Jira Cloud, Server, or Data Center. So that's also just a great way to start, just kind of hopping into the tool. So thank you everyone for joining us. Sergey's great presentation.
Thank you much, Steve, and thank you also. Good stuff. And yep, have a great one, guys. Bye-bye.